So this is the first race of the King's Cup, and this event hasn't been raced at Henley for, would you believe, 100 years. It was won in 1919, just after the First World War, by Australia, their first #1 crew. And we are looking at the two opponents here, the crew from Australia on the Berkshire station, and that is that crew. It's a mixed crew. You'll notice men and women from the Australian Defence Forces, and also men and women from the Netherlands Armed Forces. There are 8 crews in this event. They've been living with each other in Dalton Barracks in Castle Walton, and they're hosted by the 4th Regiment of the Royal Logistics Corps for about the last 1.5 weeks. A lot of camaraderie, but they're all focused on winning this event. The first time it's been run at Henley in 100 years.
Great to see a mixed event at Henley. Fantastic. Men and women racing in 8s like this, and the Australian Armed Forces crew just taking an early lead there over the Netherlands Armed Forces.
I tell you what, it's a lot of pressure to win this. The Australians have won it 100 years ago.
They did,
coming out of fighting the First World War, and Major Tom Cregan, the 32-year-old, is straight in that Australian Armed Forces crew. There he is, Major Tom Cregan,
Australia,
and the Australian Regular Army, Royal Australian Electrical Mechanical Engineers.
Some very strong military-looking moustaches in that Australian boat as well. Actually, I'm very envious. I might have to try and grow one of them myself.
Well, do you know what? Until 1916, it was compulsory for men to wear a moustache in the British Armed Forces, and the Australians were part of the British Armed Forces in the First World War. So having a tash, a lot of those guys in that Australian crew back in 1919 that won would have had moustaches. Let's just give a name check to those. Sergeant Robb, Lieutenant House, Lieutenant McGill, Gunner Scott, Lieutenant Houndstein, Major Sid Middleton, the 6th man in that Australian crew that won in 1919, and he with Houndstein was a winner of the Grand Challenge Cup back in 1912. Gunner Metam, Corporal Disher, and the Cox was Sergeant Smedley. And those are the Australians that won this event back in 1919. They said, can we keep this cup? George V said yes. It went back to Australia, and the King's Cup is now being raced for by the states, interstate races in Australia. And we're looking at this event 100 years on. Mixed crews.
Very strong race there from the Australian crew. Now just looking at the Netherlands Armed Forces crew. So this crew relatively new, only really been rowing. Some of them only started in February this year, so relatively new to the sport, which is great. And their coach, Tess Paulings, has been training them down at the Baranda Military Academy. Always difficult trying to round people up from different places all over a country, and actually these guys have turned up to Henley relatively late, only joining last week just before qualifiers, and actually some of them had an exam yesterday. So it's been sort of a busy couple of weeks for this crew, and getting together and even just racing has been a big achievement.
So it's an interesting shout, isn't it, having mixed crews? I would like to see, I must say, with mixed crews in the Olympics. I think, you know, with pressure on places for rowing, you know, why not have mixed crews? I mean, what are some of the pressures of mixed crews? We do have it in para rowing, of course. The Paracox fours, which Britain is Paralympic champions, are mixed. Have you ever owned a mixed crew, and what's it been like?
I think I've hopped out in mixed doubles, because we do have that at like the pairs head, don't we, which is good fun. And I've done training in mixed crews actually. When I was on the national team, lightweight rowers, we would be on the same training camps as the women's team as well. So sometimes there would be some hopping into the women's 8 to sort of keep that boat going along. So yeah, I think it's when you'll notice that usually women have a sort of really good boat feel and really a good ability to connect with the water and move it, whereas sometimes in men's crews you just rely a bit more on brute force. So actually I think having the best of both is really quite an interesting thing to be doing here. And actually where you put the women in the boat, you know, the Australian crew put them in the bow seat and the 3-seater looks there. Actually, whereas you know potentially could there be an argument for the stroke seat, or it depends what you're looking to get.
Yeah, so we're looking at the bowwoman, Lieutenant Colonel Selina Rowland, 48 years of age, going down the boat to Flying Officer Ruby Brady Walsh, the 27-year-old, in the Cox's seat, and giving a name check to the other members of this Australian crew, leading the Dutch in this first heat over 100 years of the King's Cup, last race in 1919. Lieutenant Casey Pickett, Corporal Rachel Rook, the 3 seats. 4, you can just see the features of Corporal Damien Richardson, the 27-year-old. Private Charles Patterson in the 5 seat. Lieutenant Simon Gillespie, 28 years of age. Captain Nicholas Waugh, 29, and then of course Major Tom Crebden with the Tash. And if you're watching this back in Australia, this piece of history, we know the King's Cup is the interstate race in Australia, that piece of trophy where it's come back. The Aussies have brought it back. I think they're afraid that someone's going to actually keep it here, or it's going to stay in the Henley Trophy cabinet. But I believe that the King's Cup is over here, and it's wonderful to see this connection with the regatta, and they've made such a fuss over it. The cover of the Henley programmes is the same cover as the Henley programmes back in 1919, when the war-torn nations of the world celebrated peace with a special regatta at Henley in 1919. And some of the competitors in that crew, like Major Sid Middleton, he fought in the British Army with Australian forces at Gallipoli. He fought with the British Army on the Somme in 1916, in 1918, and it is a real thing that we have at Henley this year, the King's Cup being raced once more, and marked with this first heat there, the crew from the Dutch Armed Forces racing against their opponent from the Australian Armed Forces. And a lot more Armed Forces crews to come in. The Australians in 1919 beat the crew from Oxford University.
So as we're talking about where would you mix up the athletes within the boat, and actually here on the Dutch crew you can see they'd actually placed one of the girls in the stroke seat, and you know, maybe that's, you know, I would have thought that's a good strategy to go for, try and harness the rhythm and
I was
boat feel.
I was involved in a sort of celebrity rowing thing called the Other Boat Race, and I was running the Oxford crew, and we had a female stroke woman there because she had a fantastic rhythm, and you know, backed up with the male at 7, but really it was her rhythm that was best, so that's put her in the stroke seat. And the Australian Armed Forces crew looking very comfortable coming down to the finish. Crews from the New Zealand Defence Force, the Bundeswehr in Germany, Canadian Armed Forces, the US Armed Forces, the French Armed Forces, and of course the UK Armed Forces await in the draw. But this is job done for the Australians. It was Australia that won the King's Cup 100 years ago, and this Australian crew will hope to do the same, progress serenely through the finishing line in this opening heat of the King's Cup. And they're pretty chuffed about that first race. We can hear their shouts just opposite the commentary box as the crew from the Dutch Armed Forces cross the finishing line. Their regatta is done. Australia Defence Force progress onwards.